South Carolina lawyer and member of a well-known legal dynasty, made headlines in 2021 following the murder of his wife Maggie and son Paul. The brutal killings took place
in June 2021. The Murdaugh family, a well-known legal dynasty in South Carolina, found themselves at the center of a tragic and mysterious double homicide. Maggie Murdaugh, 52, and her son Paul, 22, were brutally murdered at their family hunting lodge, leaving the community shocked and searching for answers. The investigation soon focused on one suspect, Alex Murdaugh, Maggie's husband and Paul's father. As a prominent attorney, Alex Murdaugh's involvement in the case sent shockwaves through the state and the nation. After a highly publicized trial, Alex Murdaugh was found guilty on all counts related to the murders of his wife and son. However, in a stunning turn of events, Murdaugh's attorneys have now filed a motion requesting a retrial, alleging jury tampering by the county clerk, Rebecca Hill. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the background of the case, the key moments from the trial, and the recent developments that could potentially lead to a new trial for Alex Murdaugh. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on this fascinating case and other captivating true crime stories. On June 7th, 2021, the small community of Islandton, South Carolina, was rocked by a horrific discovery at the Murdaugh family's sprawling hunting lodge known as Moselle. Maggie Murdaugh, 52, and her younger son, Paul Murdaugh, 22, were found brutally shot to death near the estate's dog kennels. According to reports, Alex Murdaugh, Maggie's husband and Paul's father, called 911 at around 10 p.m. that evening, claiming he had discovered the bodies upon returning home from visiting his ailing father in the hospital. Investigators arrived at the scene to find Maggie and Paul Murdaugh deceased, both having suffered multiple gunshot wounds. Maggie Murdaugh was shot with an assault-style rifle, while Paul Murdaugh was killed with a shotgun. The use of two different firearms in the crime suggested a level of planning and intent behind the murders. As the investigation unfolded, details emerged about the Murdaugh family's complicated history and the events leading up to the tragic killings. The murders sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Islandton and the surrounding Low-Country region, where the Murdaugh family had long been a prominent and influential presence. The family's extensive ties to the legal system, with generations of Murdaughs serving as prosecutors, only heightened the public's interest and speculation surrounding the case. As news of the murders spread, the nation's attention turned to the small South Carolina town, with many questioning how such a violent act could have taken place within a family known for their power and prestige. The investigation into the deaths of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh would ultimately uncover a tangled web of secrets, alleged crimes, and a family tragedy that would captivate the nation. The loss of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh left a profound impact on their loved ones and the community they called home. The search for answers and justice in their murders would consume the public's attention and raise difficult questions about power, influence, and the pursuit of the truth in the face of unimaginable grief. Alex Murdaugh, the patriarch of the family at the center of the tragic murders, was a prominent figure in South Carolina's legal community. Born into a family with deep roots in the Low-Country region, Alex followed in the footsteps of his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, all of whom had served as prosecutors for the 14th Judicial Circuit. The Murdaugh family's legal dynasty began in 1920, when Randolph Murdaugh Sr. became the first elected solicitor for the 14th Judicial Circuit. His son, Randolph Buster Murdaugh Jr., took over the position in 1940 and held it until his retirement in 1986. Alex's father, Randolph Murdaugh III, then assumed the role, serving until 2005. Together, the three generations of Murdaughs held the position of chief prosecutor for a staggering 87 years. Alex Murdaugh, while not serving as a solicitor himself, built a successful career as a personal injury attorney. He worked at the family law firm, Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elsroth and Dietrich, PMP'd, which was founded by his great-grandfather in 1910. The firm gained a reputation for securing large settlements and verdicts for its clients, particularly in cases involving wrongful death and personal injury claims. As a member of the Murdaugh legal dynasty, Alex wielded significant influence in the region. The family's long-standing ties to law enforcement, the judiciary, and local politics created a complex web of power that extended far beyond the courtroom. This influence, coupled with the family's wealth and social status, made the Murdaughs a formidable presence in the Low Country. Alex Murdaugh's role as a prominent attorney and member of the Murdaugh family placed him in a unique position of power and privilege. However, the murders of his wife and son and the subsequent revelations of his alleged financial crimes shattered the family's carefully crafted image.
About the change of clothes, not really. I mean, he was never asked to produce the clothing formally. And, it was a blue Columbia shirt.
And raised questions about the true nature of their influence and actions. As the investigation into the murders and Alex Murdaugh's alleged misdeeds unfolded, the public began to grapple with the stark contrast between the family's long-standing reputation and the disturbing accusations that emerged. The case brought to light the potential for abuse of power and the need for greater transparency and accountability within the legal system, even for those who had long been considered untouchable. As the investigation into the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh unfolded, a series of shocking allegations of financial crimes came to light against Alex Murdaugh. He was accused of misappropriating funds from his law firm and clients, as well as engaging in a scheme to defraud an insurance company. These revelations added another layer of complexity to the already intriguing case and raised questions about Murdaugh's character and motives. The financial crime allegations against Alex Murdaugh painted a picture of a man whose life was unraveling, despite his outward appearance of success and influence. As the murder trial began, many wondered how these accusations would impact the proceedings and shape public opinion of the once respected attorney. During the trial, the prosecution presented a range of compelling evidence against Alex Murdaugh. One of the most damaging pieces of evidence was a video recorded by Paul Murdaugh just minutes before he and his mother were killed. The video captured Alex Murdaugh's voice in the background, placing him at the scene of the crime and contradicting his initial statements to investigators. Additionally, the prosecution highlighted inconsistencies in Murdaugh's alibi and presented forensic evidence that linked him to the murders. They also delved into Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes, arguing that the mounting pressure from these accusations could have been a motive for the killings. Alex Murdaugh's decision to testify in his own defense was a pivotal moment in the trial. On February 23, 2023, Murdaugh took the stand and faced intense questioning from both the prosecution and his own defense team. The courtroom was packed with spectators, media, and family members as the once prominent attorney attempted to explain his actions and defend his innocence. During his testimony, Murdaugh made a startling admission. He had lied to investigators about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. In initial interviews with law enforcement, Murdaugh had claimed that he was not present at the family's hunting lodge when Maggie and Paul were shot. However, under oath, he acknowledged that this was not true. Murdaugh claimed that his deception was a result of paranoia and fear, stemming from a long-standing opioid addiction. He told the court that he had been struggling with substance abuse issues for years, and that his addiction had clouded his judgment and led him to make poor decisions. Murdaugh argued that his lies to investigators were a misguided attempt to protect himself and his family from further scrutiny. The admission of lying was a significant blow to Murdaugh's credibility and raised serious doubts about his overall innocence. Prosecutors seized on this revelation, arguing that Murdaugh's willingness to deceive law enforcement demonstrated a consciousness of guilt and a lack of trustworthiness. They suggest that if Murdaugh was willing to lie about his whereabouts, he could not be trusted to tell the truth about his involvement in the murders. Murdaugh's defense team, however, sought to frame the admission as a symptom of their client's struggles with addiction and the immense pressure he was under. They argued that Murdaugh's lies were not evidence of guilt, but rather a misguided attempt to shield himself and his family from the pain and scrutiny of the investigation. Throughout his testimony, Murdaugh maintained his innocence, denying any involvement in the deaths of his wife and son. He described the murders as a heinous crime and expressed his love for Maggie and Paul. However, the damage to his credibility had been done, and the jury was left to weigh the significance of his admission of lying against the other evidence presented in the case. The impact of Murdaugh's testimony and his acknowledgement of deception would prove to be a turning point in the trial. It raised significant questions about his character, his motives.
Alex Murdaugh still faces all those charges on the financial crimes, but what happens there could affect Buster as well, presumably?
It could potentially, and it's a little unclear what...
And his potential involvement in the murders. As the trial proceeded, the admission of lying would loom large in the minds of the jurors, shaping their perceptions of Alex Murdaugh and ultimately influencing their verdict. Throughout the trial, Alex Murdaugh's defense team worked tirelessly to counter the prosecution's case, and provide alternative explanations for the evidence presented. Despite Murdaugh's admission of lying to investigators, his attorneys maintained that he was not responsible for the deaths of his wife and son. One of the key arguments put forth by the defense was that the prosecution's evidence was largely circumstantial. They contended that while the state had presented a compelling narrative, there was no direct evidence linking Murdaugh to the murders. The defense pointed out that no eyewitnesses had placed Murdaugh at the scene at the time of the shootings, and no physical evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA, had been found to conclusively tie him to the crimes. Furthermore, the defense argued that law enforcement had failed to thoroughly investigate other potential suspects. They suggested that the police had quickly focused on Murdaugh as the prime suspect, to the exclusion of other possible perpetrators. The defense team raised questions about the adequacy of the investigation, implying that authorities might have overlooked crucial leads or evidence that could have pointed to someone else's involvement. Another significant aspect of the defense's strategy was to address Murdaugh's opioid addiction and financial troubles. While acknowledging that Murdaugh had struggled with substance abuse and faced significant financial pressures, his attorneys argued that these issues did not provide a sufficient motive for him to kill his loved ones. They painted a picture of a man who, despite his flaws and challenges, deeply loved his family and would never harm them. The defense team also sought to humanize Murdaugh, portraying him as a devoted husband and father who had been devastated by the loss of his wife and son. They called character witnesses who testified to Murdaugh's good nature and his commitment to his family and community. By presenting a more sympathetic image of their client, the defense hoped to counter the prosecution's portrayal of Murdaugh as a calculating killer. Throughout the trial, the defense team vigorously cross-examined prosecution witnesses, seeking to undermine their credibility and expose inconsistencies in their testimony. They challenged the reliability of forensic evidence, questioning the methods and conclusions of expert witnesses. The defense also presented their own experts to offer alternative interpretations of the evidence and to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. In closing arguments, the defense reiterated their belief that the prosecution had failed to meet the burden of proof necessary to convict Murdaugh. They urged the jury to carefully consider the lack of direct evidence and the possibility that someone else could have committed the murders. The defense team emphasized the importance of the presumption of innocence and reminded jurors that any reasonable doubt must be resolved in favor of their client. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury ultimately found Alex Murdaugh guilty of the murders of Maggie and Paul. The prosecution's case, bolstered by Murdaugh's own admission of lying,
and people are still intimidated by this family because they've known him their whole life. Accused of siphoning money off of judgments that he won on.
The cumulative weight of the evidence proved persuasive to the jurors. However, the defense's arguments and strategies would remain significant factors in the ongoing legal proceedings as Murdaugh's attorneys sought to appeal the verdict and secure a new trial for their client. After weeks of testimony and arguments, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict.
There are some people who fear that in the low country of South Carolina and revere them, but there are some people who fear them. On the scene that morning, didn't believe this was a hit and run to represent you. And Sandy Smith really didn't understand why she would.
They found Alex Murdaugh guilty on all counts related to the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. The quick decision by the jury was seen as a reflection of the strength of the prosecution's case and the damaging nature of Murdaugh's own testimony. The guilty verdict sent shockwaves through the community and marked a stunning fall from grace for the once powerful attorney. As the trial concluded, attention turned to the sentencing phase and the potential impact of Murdaugh's financial crime allegations on his punishment. Following his conviction on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, Alex Murdaugh faced a severe punishment. In South Carolina, the minimum sentence for murder is 30 years in prison, while the maximum sentence is life imprisonment. The weapons charges carried an additional sentence of up to 5 years, which would run concurrently with the murder sentences. Although Alex Murdaugh was not on trial for his alleged financial crimes, these accusations loomed large over the sentencing phase. The prosecution argued that Murdaugh's apparent disregard for the law and his willingness to engage in fraudulent activities demonstrated a lack of remorse and a danger to society. They urged the court to consider these factors when determining an appropriate sentence. In a surprising move, the court decided to delay Alex Murdaugh's sentencing to a later date. The judge cited the lateness of the hour and the need to consider victims' rights under the Victims' Bill of Rights as reasons for the postponement. This decision gave both the prosecution and the defense more time to prepare their arguments and allowed for the possibility of additional testimony from victims or their representatives. The postponement of the sentencing hearing added an element of uncertainty to the case's conclusion. Many were left wondering what sentence Alex Murdaugh would ultimately receive and how the financial crime allegations might influence the judge's decision. As the community awaited the final phase of this gripping trial, the focus shifted to the next unexpected development: Murdaugh's attorneys filing a motion for a retrial. In a stunning turn of events, Alex Murdaugh's attorneys filed a motion requesting a retrial just days after his conviction.
Yeah, and also we know that through the car data, they were trying to show that Alex Murdaugh was speeding, faster than he had been the whole day, right after Paul and Maggie are killed, maybe trying to establish an alibi to be from A to B to C really quickly. There was also conversation that his car passed by.
This move surprised many who had followed the trial closely and believed that the evidence against Murdaugh was overwhelming. The motion for a retrial added a new layer of complexity to the case and raised questions about the validity of the original trial's outcome. The basis for Murdaugh's retrial request centered around allegations of jury tampering by the Colleton County Clerk of Court, Rebecca Hill. Murdaugh's attorneys claimed that Hill had inappropriate contact with the jurors during the trial and that she had attempted to influence their decision-making process. Specifically, they alleged that Hill had told jurors not to be swayed by the defense's arguments and to focus on Murdaugh's guilt. Building on the allegations of jury tampering, Murdaugh's attorneys argued that their client had been denied a fair trial. They claimed that Hill's actions had tainted the jury and that her alleged interference had prevented Murdaugh from receiving an impartial verdict. The defense team emphasized the importance of a fair trial and suggested that the court had a duty to grant a retrial in light of these serious allegations. The request for a retrial introduced a significant degree of uncertainty into the Alex Murdaugh case. If granted, a new trial would mean that the entire process would begin anew, with a fresh jury and the possibility of new evidence or arguments being presented. This development could potentially delay justice for the victims' families and prolong the community's healing process. However, if the court denies the request for a retrial, Alex Murdaugh's conviction would stand and the case would move forward to the sentencing phase. The allegations of jury tampering would likely be investigated further and, if substantiated, could result in additional legal consequences for Rebecca Hill.
McElveen, when she was questioned by prosecutors, said that there was nothing that she saw or heard that rose to the level of her needing to contact Judge Newman to inform her of Becky Hill's behavior.
And others involved. As the legal system grapples with this unexpected development, the public is left to speculate about the future of the Alex Murdaugh case and the impact of the retrial request on the pursuit of justice for Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. The Alex Murdaugh murder trial has been a complex and emotionally charged case that has captured the nation's attention. From the brutal murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh to the revelations of Alex Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes, this case has been marked by unexpected twists and turns. The trial itself was an intense affair, with the prosecution presenting a strong case against Murdaugh and the defense fighting back with claims of innocence and insufficient evidence. With Murdaugh's attorneys filing a motion for a retrial, the legal process is far from over. The court will need to review the allegations of jury tampering and determine whether there is sufficient evidence to grant a new trial. If the motion is denied, the case will proceed to the sentencing phase, where Murdaugh could face life in prison. If the motion is granted, the entire trial process will begin anew, prolonging the search for justice and closure. The ongoing impact of the case on the Murdaugh family and the South Carolina community. The Alex Murdaugh murder trial has left an indelible mark on the Murdaugh family and the wider South Carolina community, and its effects will likely be felt for generations to come. Regardless of the outcome of Murdaugh's retrial request, the damage inflicted by this tragic case is irreparable. The Alex Murdaugh murder trial may have come to a close, but its impact will reverberate through the lives of those touched by this case for years to come. As we reflect on the lessons learned and the challenges ahead, let us not forget the power of resilience, compassion, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Together, the South Carolina community can begin to heal, grow, and build a better future for all. If you found this video informative and want to stay up to date on the latest developments in the Alex Murdaugh case, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you in-depth coverage of the stories that matter most. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.